Right. So today we are doing Babylon's Infuriating Wine Part 1. And we are on lesson 6. Now, all the lessons that we studied so far are in preparation to the study that we are going to do of the book of Habakkuk. Now, Habakkuk is not a book that we study often, right? Sometimes we find it even difficult to find Habakkuk in the Bible. But this lesson, now once we understand what we have been studying, then the book Habakkuk becomes easy to understand, right? Because it's foundational, but we're studying to understanding Habakkuk. Now, today we are going to study about Babylon's infuriating wine. And when we get to Habakkuk, we're going to find several verses that refer to wine, because the book of Habakkuk is dealing with the context of Babylon coming against Jerusalem. It's within the same historical context. And then when we come to Habakkuk, once we have studied what we are going to study today, understanding Habakkuk becomes a breeze. It becomes easy. Okay? Now, the terminology, the terms used of Revelation 14, 6 to 12, that is the second angel's message, indicates that the three angels' messages are sequential. That means first the first angel comes, then immediately after the first angel comes the second, and then the third, right? So they are these messages are announced or proclaimed in this order: 1, 2, 3. So the second angel's message announces the fall of Babylon, and the second angel gives us the reason because the people rejected the first angel's message. That is why Babylon has fallen. If they didn't reject the first angel's message, then Babylon wouldn't fall. So the second angel's message is because Babylon rejected the first angel's message. And the third angel is going to say, if you don't accept the first angel's message and you don't get out of Babylon, you're going to receive the mark of the beast and the wrath of God. Okay, so the third angel says, this is definitely what's going to happen if you don't accept the first angel message. Second angel is telling you to come out of Babylon, you don't come out of Babylon. So let's read Revelation 14:8, which is the second angel's message. And we will look at it in connection with the first angel's message, because the second angel is saying, come out of Babylon. Why is she telling you to come? He telling you to come out of Babylon? Because of the first angel's message, right? Okay, let's read Revelation 14:8.
And another angel followed, saying, Babylon is fallen, that great city, because she has made all nations drink of the wine of the wrath of her fornication.
Okay. Now we find here several concepts here of Babylon is fallen, right? Because Babylon is fallen because she made all the nations drink this wine. Now we're going to find out what this wine is, right? And because of that, she's fallen, right? Now, before we understand the fall of Babylon in the book of Revelation, we must understand what Babylon is, right? Then we must understand what the wine is. So we will first look at what Babylon is. Now, in Revelation, Babylon has a broad meaning, and then it also has a narrow meaning, narrow one. First, we need to understand that Revelation is not describing the fall of a literal city of Babylon. Okay, in biblical Mesopotamia. Sorry, my tongue got twisted there. Right? It's not talking about a literal city. That Babylon in Mesopotamia ceased to exist a long time ago. Right? It's not in existence today. So the evidence what we find in the Bible indicates that Babylon represents a spiritual and a global coalition. A coalition is so many things joining together, right? That oppose God and his people in the last remnant time. So the Babylon that Revelation is talking about is spiritual, and it is talking about so many coalition, a great coalition, and this particular coalition is going to oppose God's faithful people who are faithful to God. So let's look at the broad meaning of Babylon, right? There is a threefold confederation. The coalition consists of three main parts or individuals, right? Now, in the broader sense, Babylon is composed of a threefold confederacy of powers, right? That will rule the world with an iron fist. Now, rule the world with an iron fist means that they will control, right? They will control the world at the end of time. This three-part group, a group that consists of three parts. What are the three members of this coalition, right? Who are these members? Revelation 16, 13 to 14 gives us an explanation that of Babylon and the three confederate powers that join her. Now remember, these are powers and they are going to control the world. So let's find out who or what these powers are. So let's read Revelation 16, 13 to 14 and then verse 19 also.
And I saw three unclean spirits like frogs coming out of the mouth of the dragon, out of the mouth of the beast, and out of the mouth of the false prophet. For they are spirits of demons, performing signs which go out to the kings of the earth and of the whole world to gather them to the battle of that great day of God Almighty. Now the great city was divided into three parts, and the cities of the nations fell, and great Babylon was remembered before God to give her the cup of the wine of the fierceness of his wrath.
Okay. So now, according to the verses that were just read, is there going to be a gathering, a collection, right? A grouping or a coalition of three powers with the multitudes of the world? And are they going to be united? Absolutely, right? This text is telling us that. Because it says they're going, they go to the kings of the earth and the whole world to gather them to the battle of that great day of God Almighty. Now, this is the battle of Armageddon, which is mentioned a little bit later in Revelation 16. Okay. Now, up to this point, is Babylon united? Yes or no?
No.
At this point, Babylon is united. They are gathered, aren't they? They're saying they're gathered. So at this point, the trilogy is united in a common cause, right? They are different powers, but they're united because of a common cause. Now, but then something happens in verse 19. The great city. What is this great city? Well, it's Babylon. They're discussing Babylon, right? In the book of Revelation. But Rome is Babylon. So what happens suddenly? This trilogy falls apart. They break apart and it was divided into three parts. Now, what are the three parts? It's highlighted there on the text. One is the dragon, two is the beast, and three is the false prophet in this context of these verses. The Bible tells us that a time is coming when this threefold coalition is going to break apart and they're going to be divided. Okay? And when does this happen? Right? At the very end, it says, and the cities of the nations fell, and great Babylon was remembered before God to give her the cup of the wine of the fierceness of his wrath. Now, this is the time of the plague. Right? Now we're talking about the end of time because Revelation is referring to the end of time. And this is the time of the plagues and the second coming of Christ. So the three evil spirits go out to gather the whole world, right, in a system that opposes God's law, opposes God's people. And then what happens? When Jesus manifests his wrath in the plague, this threefold coalition that was united to cause problems falls apart. Okay? Can we think of another place in the Bible where the word Babylon is used and there's a united project to establish a world monarchy, and then they are divided? We'll come to that in a bit. But now in the next slide, I want us to discuss something. Now, the first time in the Bible, okay, let's go into that. The word Babel is used in Genesis 11. Okay, so must there also be some relationship between Babylon in Revelation and Babel in Genesis? Now, do you remember the story of Babel?
Mm-hmm.
Remember, they were united in what project? What was their project? Now, Mrs. White says that they wanted to establish a universal monarchy headquartered there where they were building the tower. They were expecting to rule the world, and the project was going well. They were all together, right? And they were building this huge tower so that if God destroyed the world ever again, they wouldn't get destroyed, but the tower is going to be huge and big. But then what happened? God confused our languages. And the united project, the United Nations, that time or something, became divided. And Ellen White explains in Patriarchs and Prophets, then when one started talking in Spanish, the other spoke in French, and the other spoke in Sinhalese, and someone else spoke in Tamil, and they got angry at each other, and there was shedding of blood among them because they couldn't understand what the other person was saying. God confused their language, which up to that point they had been speaking one language. So then what happens when you don't understand what is communication? When there's a break in communication, the project was broken apart. The project ended. Now that is the backdrop to this. Now, is that clear? Because it's the same Babel in Revelation. It's the same Babylon, first united in a project to establish a world monarch. Now, can you see Satan tried it at Babel? He continues to try to have a world monarchy. But the Bible tells us quite clearly that that failed, right? That is what we are saying. And we find that at Babel, the unity is broken apart, and they end up fighting each other because they don't know what they are each taught. Now, we had previously encountered these three powers in Revelation 30, right? See, Revelation 16 is not the first place where you have this unity of these three powers, this coalition. They actually are introduced in Revelation 30, right? I put up that chart there so we can understand it better. There in Revelation 13, the dragon, we get the dragon. The dragon primarily represents Satan, right? But Satan, in today's world, Satan is not openly doing what he's doing, but it's Satan working. So we find Satan in the world today works through the civil powers of the world, or Satan works through the Roman Empire during that time. He gives it power, the throne and authority. What is the power? Power is, remember, they're controlling the world. So they have the throne, the authority, the military, and the civil powers of the beast. Okay, they have all the power to do what they want. This Satan gives that power to the beast, right? So now in Revelation 13, we get the dragon, and we're talking about this threefold unity. Then in Revelation 16, is still referred to as a dragon. But Revelation 17 refers to this first dragon as king or civil ruler. They're the same person. It is Satan working through the civil government, right? And we will come to examples of that soon. Then you get this sea beast, Revelation 13. Revelation 16 calls him the beast. But Revelation 17 calls it the harlot. And we know the harlot represents the paper. So the sea beast then logically is the paper or the harlot. Then we find Revelation 13 talking about a land beast. In Revelation 16, that land beast is called a false prophet. Okay? And Revelation 17 gives us the explanation that these false prophets are the daughters of the harlot or the papacy or apostate Protestant. The Roman Catholic Church after the Reformation had many new churches coming out of it. They were called the Protestants because they were protesting against the papacy, right? Is that clear? Okay, so the beast, the papacy, we find then receives the deadly wound. And it right now it's convalescing. It is some restoration. And after this beast received the deadly wound, this land beast that appears, when you study Revelation 13, you know the land beast is the United States or the false prophet or apostate Protestantism, right? Now, this land beast restores the sea beast power, right? Sea beast or the harlot, the papacy power, right? And the power that the beast, and this is the power that the beast lost because of the deadly wound. Now, when did the papacy get a deadly wound? The papacy got a deadly wound in 1798 when Emperor Napoleon's General Berthier came and took the Pope captive. So then the Pope lost his authority over civil power, but religion, the religious ecclesiastical power continued, but he could no longer control the world's governments, right? So that is what the deadly wound means. Now, the papacy lost it then, no, the papacy doesn't have it still. Now, by making an image of or to the land beast, which is described in Revelation 13, it describes the future dimension of these three powers in Revelation, but with different terminology. So this beast, the sea beast, the harlot, the papacy got a wound, is going to be restored by whom? The land beast. But that is still future because right now the papacy's wound hasn't healed, but it is healing. It is getting better as we talk. Now in Revelation 17, like we just noticed, you find different terminology, but you have the same threefold coalition united for a period of time. But then later on, we are going to see that they're going to be divided. They're going to fall apart, right? Because the reason why they join together is going to break and they're going to fall apart. But right now, what we're talking about is they are joined together. Okay? That's clear? Now someone might object, wait a minute, doesn't the dragon represent Seth? Yeah, in a primary sense, it does. However, in a secondary sense, it represents Satan working stealthily behind the scene through the civil powers of the world. Here is evidence that the dragon represents Satan working through the political systems. Why is that? Because right now Satan is not openly doing what he is doing. We don't see him, right? We don't see it. So he's using people to do his work. Now there is an example given to us about how Satan works using the civil authority. Let's read Ezekiel 29:3.
Ezekiel 29:3. Behold, I am against you, Pharaoh king of Egypt, the great dragon that lies in the midst of his streams, that says, My Nile is my own. I made it for myself.
Okay. So in that verse, who actually was behind Pharaoh to try and keep Israel from leaving the land of Egypt? Satan. Who wanted Moses dead? It was Satan. But how did Satan maneuver this? How did he use his stealthy power to get his work done? He used Pharaoh in order to try to slay Moses, right, in the story, so that this great dragon, so we find that this great dragon really is the devil, but working through the civil powers, because right now he works through government, even though they don't see it. I don't think Pharaoh realized that it was the devil controlling it, right? Now, this next one is talking about Jesus, when Jesus was born. Who was waiting for Jesus when Jesus was born? It was the dragon. Let's read Revelation 12:4.
Revelation 12:4. And the dragon stood before the woman who was ready to give birth to devour her child as soon as it was born.
So Revelation is saying the dragon is the old serpent, who's the devil, who's Satan, stood before the woman. The woman here is God's church, right? And who was ready for Jesus. The time was ready for Jesus to come into this world, to be born, to devour, to destroy the child as soon as it was born. Now, how did this happen? Right? Let's read Matthew 2:16.
Then Herod, when he saw that he was deceived by the wise men, was exceedingly angry. And he sent forth and put to death all the male children who were in Bethlehem and all in its, I can't see it.
Districts from 2 years old and under, according to the time which he had determined from the wise men. Right? So now we have the story of the wise men came. They said they're looking for the king who was born in Bethlehem. And so they told Herod, and Herod told them, okay, you go and look for the king and come back and tell me, right? But the angel came, and we know that they took a different path. So who is it that wanted to kill Jesus? Was it the devil or was it Herod? The answer is yes to both. Satan, the real dragon, was working behind the scenes, influencing Herod to kill the child. Herod, on his part, feared that he was going to lose his throne. And the devil said, hey, you can't let this child live because he's going to take your throne. But did Jesus come to take Herod's throne? No, but that is Satan deceiving Herod, right? But the devil really is thinking, if I let this child live, I'm going to lose my throne. Because Jesus came to destroy who? He came to destroy the devil, right? So the dragon is Satan working through Rome, a civil power during the time of Jesus. Is that clear? Let's move on. Now, Mrs. White clearly understood this. Let's read what she says in Testimony to Ministers and Gospel Workers, page 39.
Kings and rulers and governors have placed the brand of Antichrist upon themselves and are represented as the dragon who goes to make war with the saints, with those who keep the commandments of God and who have the faith of Jesus. In the 6th century, the papacy had become firmly established. Its seat of power was fixed in the imperial city, and the Bishop of Rome was declared to be the head over the entire church. Paganism had given place to papacy. The dragon had given to the beast his power and his seat, the great authority.
So Revelation 12:17 says, when it says, the dragon was wroth with the woman and went to make war with the remnant of her seed. Who is really doing it? It's Satan, right? Satan is stealthily behind the scenes controlling kings and rulers and governors to make this decision. Now, these kings and rulers and governors allow Satan to control them, right? Now, the question is, how much power would the papacy have if it couldn't use the civil powers of the world? Now, the papacy is a ecclesiastical body. It's a church. But papacy means joining of church and state. But the Roman Catholic Church is a church. Now, has the church authority over countries? No, right? So, without the power of given to the church to make it the papacy, that's when it becomes papacy. Papacy doesn't have power. Its only power is as a church, right? Now, that is why it's challenged. He said this, how many troops does the papacy have? The papacy is a leech, it attaches itself to the civil power. So the papacy joins with the civil power, gets all her things done because she doesn't have the political, military might that the state has, right? And she uses that to control, use the state's military and political and judicial might so that she can get her work. Okay? Without the state, she's nothing. She's just a church, right? So the danger is the papacy working through the civil powers of the world. When the church controls the civil powers and they start acting and doing things for her, that's where the danger arises. Okay. Now notice also, I think we read that also. Great Controversy, page 54. Speaking about pagan Rome, how pagan Rome passed the baton to papal Rome in the 6th century. Okay. Now, whereas in Revelation 13 refers to this threefold confederation, right? Or this threefold union, as the dragon, remember we saw the dragon, the beast, and the land, right? So there are three that are joined together in one common goal. Revelation 19, 19, and 20 describes the coalition as the kings of the earth, the beast, and the false prophet. We saw that all, right? Now, is that clear? It's talking about the same coalition of three entities, but different names are given in the Bible, in Revelation, in different chapters. But these descriptions, once you, which are symbolic, once you understand the symbols, it's very clear that they're talking about the same three people. So see how the devil works by stealth, right? And the world is oblivious that their decisions are being actually made by the influence of Satan. Now, do the world leaders know that every action that they're taking, they think they're taking on behalf of their country, which has a greater influence on the world today, that they have been influenced by Satan? They haven't the foggiest idea because they haven't studied Revelation like you and I are doing. Okay? But you and I are wise now because we have studied the Bible and we know where this is coming from and where this is going. Now, the central figure of Babylon, let's discuss. Now, although the book of Revelation informs us that end time Babylon will be composed of the trilogy of power, the evidence indicates that one of them will control and dominate the other two, right? So these three groups, there is one who is going to be dominant, one who is going to be over all of them, right? And that one part of the coalition is going to control the others to get the other two to do what she wants. Now the sea beast, Revelation 13, or the harlot in Revelation 17, like Jezebel in the story of Elijah, will be the beast, and the harlot will be the central protagonist, the central figure, right? She will pull all the strings and orchestrate all the events. The other two members of the confederacy or the group will merely be her puppets. So then who is the dangerous figure in this story? Let's see. All the kings of the earth, they are a danger. Are all the kings of the earth a danger in themselves alone? No, they're not a danger in themselves alone. Is the land beast dangerous in itself? Alone is the land beast dangerous? No. Then who is the dangerous figure that in a restricted sense is called Babylon in Revelation 7? It is the harlot, which is the symbol of the papacy. The papacy is going to control the civil powers and apostate Protestantism, and she is going to get them to do what she wants. But those other two are clueless, right? The strong one is this. So that is the central figure, Babylon. Now let's look at the sea beast, the central protagonist, central figure in Revelation 30. Okay, I put up some things there, so let's read that together. Now notice the details in Revelation 13, 1 to 10. And also we connect Daniel 7, 8, because the little horn is the same as the beast of Revelation 30. So that's why the book of Daniel and Revelation are complementary to each other. When we need to study them together, and when we understand the symbolisms expressed there, it becomes very clear that the two books are talking about the same. Now in Revelation 13, 1 to 10, the sea beast is at the center stage, right? The dragon gave the sea beast its power. The dragon is the civil authority, gives the sea beast its civil, political, military, and judicial power. Its throne and great authority, right? So when it's given its power, when the papacy can control at its use, it can use these powers, then it becomes deadly, right? Now the sea beast, then we are told in Revelation 13, ruled for 42 months. Now we have studied that before. 42 months is another way of describing that is the 1,260 years or days, which is the same as the times and half a time or 3.5 times, right? They are all referring to the same time period, right? The sea beast, another description of the sea beast is the beast spoke blasphemies against God. Now it doesn't say that the king did it. The USA, the third member of the coalition, hasn't even risen at this time, right? It's going to rise at the end of the 17th century, but at this time, the land beast hasn't even risen. It's just the territory of America. There is no United States still, right? Then we find it persecuted the saints of the Most High. So did the papacy use the civil powers during this 1,260 years or 42 months or 3.5 times to control, to persecute and kill God's people, beginning in 538 AD, I hope I got that. Till 1798, they killed millions and millions of Christians who opposed them. It attempted to change God's law, right? This system, this papacy, church and state, because it has the state powers, it can persecute. A church can't persecute because it has no civil powers, but when it joins with the nations, it can persecute. Then it tried to change God's law. The mark of the beast is the enforcement of the change in God's law on the pain of death, right? It launched an attack against Christ's ministration in the heavenly sanctuary. It launched an attack means it there was a counterfeit here on earth now. Jesus is in the heavenly sanctuary after he rose, and he is mediating on our behalf. And what he's doing there, they brought it down to earth and gave humans that part. So they launched an attack on what Jesus is doing there. The sword of the state gave its deadly wound at the end of the 42 months. The sword of the state is, remember, the civil power of the state when General Berthier came and took Pope captive and all the nations joined together where they ceased to support the papacy. Then the papacy ceased to be the papacy, but it continued as a church. Remember that, right? For a period, this deadly wound that it received, I mean, it received a wound because it was a confederation, and the papacy is the joining of state and church and state. Now it no longer had the power of the state. So it had this deadly wound, right? Has been put on pause, and it is inactive for over 200 years, right? So the papacy is inactive for the past 200 years. Now, when the land beast heals, now it is the land beast, it's going to be America, that is going to heal this deadly wound, then we find that the world will marvel at it and worship this entity. How do they worship it? Not bowing down. They worship by, remember, it changed God's law from the 7-day Sabbath to the Sunday Sabbath. Then people follow that. Then it is, they are wandering after the beast. They're doing what the beast wants. So just to explain what the deadly wound is, like I said, people think that the deadly wound was given to the Catholic Church. But that is not correct, right? The deadly wound was not given to the Catholic Church. The deadly wound was given to the papacy. Okay? Now, what's the difference between the papacy and the Catholic Church? The Catholic Church is the religious sect of the papacy with its religious aspects. It deceives the populace. It deceives its religious aspects and doctrines and dogmas. It deceives the people. The other part of this papacy, which is also a combination of two, the church and the state, is the political part. Through that, the papacy deceives the political powers of the world so that they support her and give their military might, their civil and judiciary power to her to do as she wishes. So the papacy is a union of church and state. The church using the state to impose her beliefs and practices, right? That is the papacy, not the Catholic Church alone, right? The papacy is a union of church and state. Now, question. In 1798, when the papacy received its deadly wound, did the Roman Catholic Church stop functioning? No. Did the people still go and have their babies baptized? Yes. Did the people go to confession? Yes. Did the people go and receive the Eucharist? Yes. Eucharistic communion? Yes. The Catholic Church did not cease to function. What ceased to function was the political power or the civil power, which was withdrawn from the papacy. And for the past 200 years, the papacy has been convalescing. It can't do what it wants because it doesn't have the support of the state, of the world government, right? So what's going to happen in the future? This deadly wound is going to be healed. What is the wound now? That the state stopped supporting her, stopped giving her the authority, military, political, and judicial, right? Now, what is going to happen when it heals? What does that mean? What does healing of the deadly wound mean? It means the papacy is once again going to receive this civil power. And it's not very complicated. So once she receives that support, then she will influence the countries, the leadership of these countries, to do exactly what she did during the 1,260 years. Right? So right now she doesn't have the authority, but when she gets it, she becomes whole and she becomes the papacy. Now, how is the papacy going to receive a restoration of its power? By the most unlikely of beasts, the beast that rises from the earth, or which is called the false prophet. Okay. Now let's talk about this land beast. Right? The land beast pleases the sea. Right? I'm not going to read that those texts for time's sake, but follow along with it as we go through what these explanations, right? Now, Revelation 13:11 to 18 tells us that the land beast will render homage to the sea beast. Remember who is the sea beast? The papacy. And the land beast is America, right? It's going to render homage, it's going to love her, right? to do what she wants with America's political might, civil powers, and judicial, right? Everything that it does to please the first beast. So this land beast, everything it does is to please this sea beast. Notice the list, right? Take a note of the verses that are up there and check them for yourself. The land beast will exercise all authority of the first beast. The land beast, right? It will force the whole world to worship the first beast. How do they worship the first beast? By worshipping on Sunday. It will do everything in the presence of the first beast. What does it mean in the presence of the first beast? It means on behalf of the first beast, right? It worked for the first beast at commissioning the first beast. So the presence, do everything in the present beast. It works on behalf of this first beast, right? It does everything for the first beast, right? It works for the first beast. Is that clear? Now, this power that rises from the earth, now the earth represents a sparsely populated area, while the seas represent populated, right? Tumultuous seas represent, it was with wars that the Europe, each kingdom came into existence, right? So that is what that means, the seas and the churning up the seas, but land means sparsely populated. That's where America was. America was hardly populated in the pre-Greenspan, right? So this power rises from the earth as actually independent from the papacy. Now people ran to America to be independent, right? Ironically, this country that separated church and state in their constitution, this country that guaranteed civil and religious liberty is going to withdraw civil and religious liberty. How? By healing the wound of the papacy, by doing what the papacy wants, right? And that God's people will be persecuted because the papacy is a persecuting church. It hasn't changed. It's just got a wound where it doesn't have authority. So it's sitting there, licking its wound, waiting for it to heal. As soon as it has its power, it's not going. It's going to do exactly what it did as before. Now, could this be possible? Very, very possible. It's happening before our very eyes today. Then it says it will make an image of the first beast. Now we found the image is that it does works for, right? It will make an image honor of or to, right, the beast, and whoever does not worship the beast will be sentenced to death. It becomes a replica of the first beast by joining together church and state, which right now is separate in that country. It will enforce the mark of the first beast on pain, if not being able to buy or sell. So those who don't worship on the first day will receive the death penalty and they won't be able to buy and sell. They will stop economics, the people purchasing, the purchasing power of the people. Now, this isn't complicated. This is actually quite simple when you understand what Revelation is describing. Looks like the center of this second beast, that looks like the career of this second beast, is to restore the power of the first beast and to heal the wound of the first. So the job of this second beast is to heal, give power back to the first beast. And when that happens, you are going to have a united threefold coalition. Right now it's happening, but not happened as yet. Now the harlot, who is called Babylon, still has the deadly wound. It has not healed. Now in 1929, contrary to what people say, in 1929, the country of Italy allowed the Roman Catholic Church to have their own little government. It's a lone little papal sect. It's the smallest country in the world, right? Now that didn't mean that the papacy was healed. Why? Because the Bible tells us the one who heals the wound is America, not Italy. And two, Italy hasn't given its political, military or judicial power to the papacy. Papacy just functions as a separate state. They have their own currencies and they have their ambassadors going to countries. but it hasn't the power of the state. It is a country without a military, if you want to say, right? So the wound, so that 1929 disestablishment of the papal see in Rome has nothing to do with the healing of the wound. The wound is healed by the beast from the land, the earth, when it joins church and state, and that did not happen in 1929. It is not Italy, like I said, that will heal the wound of the beast. Who will heal the wound of the beast? Is the United States, according to the Bible. Italy was the one that in 1929 who actually signed this accord with the papacy so that they could have their little country, right, in Italy. Is that clear? Right, let's move on. Now let's talk about the harlot. Harlot is the central protagonist, central moving power in this coalition, and she's found in Revelation 7. Now, as Revelation 13, 17 describes a confederation of these three powers. However, like we saw, chapter 9 describes this coalition as the harlot, the daughters, and the kings of the earth. So that is giving us a clearer picture a little bit, right? Although all three will form an alliance, she will pull the strings and orchestrate all activities. As stated above, the other two are just puppets, are just her puppets, right? The sea beast of Revelation 13 represents the same power of Revelation, harlot of Revelation 7. Now going to the story of Elijah. We remember the story of Elijah now? Who was the dangerous figure in the days of Elijah? Was it King Ahab? No. King Ahab was a backboneless king. He had no backbone. He did everything the wife told him. Were the false prophets the main danger to God's people? No. Satan ate at Jezebel's table. But they were not the main ones pulling the strings. Who was Jezebel? She was a harlot. Yes, she's called a harlot in 2 Kings 9:22. And not only that, she was involved in the occult because she's called a witch in 2 Kings 9:22. So who orchestrated all these events in the time of Elijah, the actual literal Elijah? It was Jezebel the harlot, right? Because the Old Testament tells us that the false prophets ate at Jezebel's table. Now you don't bite the person who feeds you, right? And Ahab did basically what she wanted. Remember, for example, Naboth's vineyard, right? Also that was wine involved. She says to King Ahab, kill Naboth so I can have his vineyard, right? Because it's the big center of us. And what does King Ahab do? He says, okay, dear. And he goes and kills poor Naboth and takes his vineyard. So who is the one who's calling the shots there? Jezebel. So I catch in the picture, in the story of Elijah will be repeated at the end of time. You will have Jezebel, you will have a king, and you will have a prophet. So now we have Jezebel is the papacy, the kings are the civil power, and we will have false prophets or daughters of the papacy. Now, the remnant is Elijah. Remember, Jesus promised that God would send Elijah before the great and terrible day of the Lord, Malachi chapter 4. Now, the interesting part is that prophecy concerning the end time Elijah was partially fulfilled in the New Testament. That's interesting. Now, who was the New Testament Elijah? It was John the Baptist. 3 times in the New Testament, John the Baptist is identified as Elijah, not the person, okay, not the incarnation of Elijah, not in person, but he came in the spirit and power of Elijah. What was Elijah's message? It was a call to Israel to reform, to turn back, reform, right? Reform and reformation. Elijah woke up Israel, right? In the Old Testament, and John the Baptist was waking up Israel in the New Testament, right? So they came to give wake-up calls. Come out of Babylon. Why? Because Babylon has not accepted the first angel's message. Babylon has fallen. If you don't come out of it, this is not going to happen. Same message, right? Now, how many enemies did John the Baptist have? You think all this is coincidence? No. This is what you call typology in the Bible, right? The Bible functions on the basis of type and antitype. Historical, literal story, and then it becomes symbolic, right? Can you see to read those verses from Mark 16 to 28? Someone can read them?
But when Herod heard, he said, "This is John, whom I beheaded. He has been raised from the dead." For Herod himself had sent and laid hold of John and bound him in prison for the sake of Herodias, his brother Philip's wife, for he had married her. Because John had said to Herod, "It is not lawful for you to have your brother's wife." Therefore, Herodias held it against him and wanted to kill him. But she could not, for Herod feared John, knowing that he was a just and holy man, and he protected him. And when he heard him, he did many things and heard him gladly. Then an opportune day came when Herod on his birthday gave a feast for his nobles, the high officers, and the chief men of Galilee. And when Herodias' daughter herself came in and danced and pleased Herod and those who sat with him, the king said to the girl, "Ask me whatever you want, and I will give it to you." He also swore to her, "Whatever you ask me, I will give you up to half my kingdom." So she went out and said to her mother, "What shall I ask?" And she said, "The head of John the Baptist." Immediately she came in with haste to take the king and asked to Immediately she came with haste to the king and asked, saying, "I want you to give me at once the head of John the Baptist on a platter." And the king was exceedingly sorry. Yet, because of the oaths and because of those who sat with him, he did not want to refuse her. Immediately, the king sent an executioner and commanded his head to be brought. And he went and beheaded him in prison, brought his head on a platter, and gave it.
Gave it to the girl, and the girl gave it to her mother. Now, is there any denunciation of fornication in the book of Revelation? Yes, right? There is between the harlot and the kings of the earth. Only in Revelation. It's not only in Revelation. It's not talking about, now in Revelation, it's not talking about a literal person committing literal fornication. It's talking about the kings of the earth committing spiritual fornication with the harlot. Now tell me, isn't it only a person who was drunk who would offer half of his kingdom? Herod was hopping drunk, as they say. Why? He was drinking wine. Now, at the end of time, there is wine also, right? That's why we are talking about wine. We are going to discuss what that wine is people are drunk with. Does the harlot in Revelation 17 have daughter? Does she fornicate with the kings of the earth? Does she hate God's end time Elijah? Is she filled with the blood of the same? Yes, yes, yes. It's like the US is going to say to the papacy, what do you want? You want the head of John the Baptist? We'll give it. Powerful story, isn't it? Who was the dangerous figure here? Who was sitting behind and controlling? Was it the daughter? No. Only as she was used by the mother was she a dangerous figure. And only as the king was used by the mother was he dangerous. Right? That's the picture that we see in Revelation 17. The daughter is just like the mother. She didn't blink an eyelid, right? She didn't say, Mother, what are you asking me to do? To kill a person and bring her head just for dancing? She just, what did she do? She didn't see anything wrong in asking for the head of John the Baptist, right? Are the kings of the earth going to be very sorry eventually? Yes, they will finally realize that Satan was behind all their actions. Right now, the politicians don't have the foggiest idea that there's a power behind them controlling their actions and decisions. There is something that is much deeper than political parties. They are all going to join together, like the Sadducees and Pharisees came together in spite of their theological differences. They said, we need to get rid of public enemy number one, or else the nation is going to perish. And so they got together, like the papacy, to influence the Roman state, which was Pilate, to kill Jesus. No different than the papacy. The king we find here had no backbone, right? Like Ahab. I mean, he could have said no. He could have definitely said no. What did it matter to save face with the people there, or to kill a person that he truly liked, right? Didn't have a backbone, right? So we find these identical characters of the Old Testament and the New Testament at the end time, the harlot. Now, isn't that this a phenomenal picture that explains what's going to happen at the end? So when you read John the Baptist's beheading, read it in light of end time revelation, right? That this is nothing new. History repeats itself. Why does history repeat itself? Because the devil doesn't change. And God doesn't change. So history doesn't change because God operates by certain principles. Satan works by certain principles. So history repeats itself. Now this will help us understand this a little bit more deeply. Remember, we are talking about a system and not a literal person. This is symbolic, right? What was literal, actual Jezebel in the Old Testament becomes symbolic in the New Testament, right? That's the principle that was local with literal Israel in the Old Testament, becomes global with spiritual Israel at the end of time. So the mark of the beast is not some tattoo that's put on people's foreheads or the right hand. The right hand means activities and what we work. The decisions means work. You're not going to be able to buy and sell unless you have this mark, right? So it controls our use. And on the forehead is your frontal lobe, is behind your forehead. That means your mind belongs to the beast. You let the beast control how you think and do things. You think you are doing it, but actually the beast is controlling, right? Some people take this literally. Some say they're going to stamp 666 on your forehead. No, the devil isn't stupid. Remember that. Who is going to follow the Antichrist if he has 666 on his forehead? Obviously, no one. So Satan works in stealth and he is not stupid. Remember that. Now, moving on. Now, we have studied this before. Waters in prophecy represent peoples, nations, tongues. Can people who are drunk make wise decisions? Can they grasp the difference between truth and error? No. And wine are the abominations of the harlot. Abominations is the idolatry of the harlot. We will get into that later. Remember, the harlots are women. Harlots, they are not male harlots. These are women harlots. And these women have daughters. So we are to look for a system that at some point had daughters like her. Daughters. And a woman in the Bible represents a church. So we had to look for a church, an apostate church that had churches rising up from her. Now, what happened in the 16th century? The Protestant Reformation, right? Do you know that in Vatican Council II, both Pope John the 23rd and Pope Paul VI refer to the Protestants as the separated children, right? So this is the mother saying her daughters have separated. They said, we welcome the separated children because the Protestant representatives were invited to be observers in this Vatican Council too. And this took place on the 11th of October 1962 and stopped on the 8th of December 1965. Right? A long time they had this council. Now, have you ever heard in history about the Inquisition? Do you think the Roman Catholic Church has had a conversion experience? She's not going to do in the future what she did in the past. I don't think so. She hasn't changed. She doesn't say she has changed, right? She has not changed. She's the same system that persecuted the saints during the 1,260 years. Only at the end, it's not going to be primarily Europe, right? It's going to be all over the world. Just imagine John having this vision, his eyes open wide. Wow, he couldn't understand fully all of this because this was for the end of time, beginning from his time, but for our time. Now let's move on quickly. The central figure is the harlot, right? The harlot is a woman, which represents an apostate church. The woman is the symbol in the Bible, which represents a pure church, right? Pure woman is a pure church, right? We found that in Revelation 12 represents, and harlot represents an apostate church. She will sit and rule over the symbolic waters, multitudes, nations, tongues, and people. She is going to rule, control the people. She will carry on an adulterous affair with the political systems of the world. That's forsaking it. She's a church. Her legitimate ruler is Jesus. Her husband is Jesus, but she's going with the rulers of the world to get her things done. She has a golden cup in a hand full of wine of her abomination, right? And she will make or force all nations to drink her wine, which are the idolatrous practices that she has. When the nations drink her wine, they will be filled with wrath. She is arrayed in purple and scarlet, preferred colors of the Roman Catholic papacy. She's very rich because she's decked with gold, precious stones, and pearls. She has daughters who came from her and will do her bidding, right? Jezebel and Herodias, remember them? She is and will be drunk with the blood of the saints and the martyrs of Jesus. We saw that during the 1,260 years. Besides being a church, she's also a political system because she is represented as a city who reigns over the kings of the earth. That is why church and state, right? By the way, did this happen with the Jewish nation as well? You know, throughout history, the greatest enemies of God's people are God's people. From the very beginning, Cain killed his own brother from his own house. Who killed the prophets in the Old Testament? The Egyptians? No, Israel, right? Israel hated their own prophets who who were for Christ. So they rose against Christ. The church persecuted God's people during the 1,260 years. Do you think it's going to be any different at the end of time? No, right? So when the church becomes allied with the political powers, it loses the reason for its existence. And that is why as Seventh-day Adventists, we shouldn't get involved in criticizing any of the rulers now. If they make decisions that are contrary to God's law, we have to stand for what is right. We should not get involved in lobbying for certain political parties because both of them are going to end up in the same camp. Okay? What we need to do is show this, what we are studying, how the Christian world needs to understand this. And unfortunately, less and less of our pulpits we are hearing. Okay. Do you know Ellen White? Now, this, what we are discussing today, is what the Bible calls present truth, truth for this time. Mrs. White says that there are many precious truths in the Word of God, but what people need now is present truth. And what is present truth is the three angels' message. And this is what Jesus is doing right now in the church. Okay. So we need to warn people, but some people say that telling these truths are not loving. And what is loving about not telling people that they will end up in the lake of fire? That's a fine kind of love, right? So we have, then they say, don't ruffle people's feathers, don't offend anybody. by telling them that that they have to accept the message, or else they're going to end up in the lake of fire if they receive the mark of the beast. I think we should be kind to them now, right? And tell them what they need to know so that they can make wise decisions for eternity. Okay? Because if we love them as we really ought to, we won't let them continue in a false sense of security. When you and I know the truth and how it's going to happen. We want to warn everybody. Like we did when a child is crossing the road, we tell them to look on both sides, and only when it's clear that they do. Why do we do that? So that they don't get run over and knocked down. Okay, moving on. Do you notice that in the second angel's message, there is a repetition of Babylon is fallen and fallen, right? Revelation 14:8 says, and another angel followed saying, Babylon is fallen, that great city. Why? Because she made all nations drink of the wine of her wrath of her fornication, right? Idolatry. The repetition of the expression fallen means that she has really truly fallen, right? And there is no hope beyond that. She has fallen beyond hope. Because in the Bible, when something is repeated, it is given for emphasis sake, right? For example, God gave 2 dreams to Joseph, right? That they would be absolutely sure, right? Then Pharaoh had the same basic dream twice, indicating doubly sure that what was going to happen. And Jesus used the expression verily, verily, when he wanted to highlight a particularly important teaching. Very, very, I say unto you, except if you're born again, you will never enter into the kingdom of heaven. Verily, I'm telling you for certain, right? And this is because God wanted to make it absolutely certain, beyond a shadow of doubt, that people knew that this is going to be fulfilled. So when the Bible says that Babylon is fallen, it means she has really fallen and there's no hope for her. And if we know that, should we not share that with everybody? Right. So we'll pick up this next week, the next part of